everyone. I am Mahenoor Yusuf, and I graduated from Harvard Business School in 2016 with a PLDA. I'm also co-chairing Harvard in Tech Seattle chapter. Harvard in Tech is the official Harvard University-wide alumni group for technology. We hope to further the development of technology through encouraging innovation, providing resources and networks, and promoting technological activity throughout the Harvard community. Today's webinar is getting recorded and will be available at the Harvard in Tech Seattle webpage. I'm here with Roger Hackett, my fellow alum, to moderate a panel discussion about technology influence on politics.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Roger Hackett, and I'm a Harvard alumni of HES 2018 and founder of Robbie, where we publish children's books and we research and develop smart play systems for bilinguals.
Thank you, Roger. We are so honored to have 5 distinguished panelists joining us today. Sonal Shah is the founding executive director of the Beeck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University. Sonal, an economist and entrepreneur, has spent her career focused on actionable innovation in the public and private sectors. She has worked in government, business, and the nonprofit sectors. Sonal has also served as the deputy assistant to the president and founding director of the White House Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation during the Obama administration. Recently, she had taken a leave of absence to work as National Policy Director for presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg. Sonal is joining us from Washington, D.C.
Hi, Mahenoor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonal. Our next panelist, Alan Collinsworth, has 20 years of experience helping companies in jurisdictions where physical security, data integrity, and political risk pose barriers to daily operations. He is the founder and president of Washington, D.C.-based Fara Group. Fara Group has advised international clients on technologies and techniques that state actors and businesses deploy on social media platforms to influence public opinion and help them formulate responses. Alan is joining us from Washington, D.C.
Hi, everybody. And to offer some additional context to my remarks, my company has an international disputes practice through which we have helped clients counter smear campaigns that took place on their on various social media battlefields, and no different than what politicians such as the ones that Sonal Shah have worked with and others, our clients, have been up against invisible forces that have turned society, its opinion leaders, and those that they need for their future success against them. And we've had to learn the means and methods behind such attacks, and have learned quite a lot about how troll farms are set up and how they operate.
Okay.
So
excellent.
Just adding that to the pretext, how I will be commenting on.
Next, Jennifer Hollett, a fellow alum, is the executive director at the Walrus, Canada's Conversation. The Walrus is known for its award-winning independent journalism, fact-checking, and national ideas-focused events. Jennifer was also the head of news and government at Twitter Canada and co-founded a startup and developed Super PAC app. Described as a Shazam for politics, the app debuted #1 in its category in the App Store, helping make political TV ads more transparent in the 2012 US election. She ran for office in the 2015 Canadian election for the New Democratic Party in one of the country's top races to watch. Jennifer is joining us from Toronto, Canada.
Great to be here. I love talking about technology and politics. So,
our next panelist, Dr. Dipayan Ghosh, is the co-director of the Digital Platforms and Democracy Project at the Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy, and a fellow at the Mosavar Rahmani Center for Business and Government at the Harvard Kennedy School, and a lecturer at Harvard Law School. He is the author of terms of disservice, how Silicon Valley is distracted by design, his research and writing on digital privacy, artificial intelligence, disinformation, and internet economics has been cited and published widely, including in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, NPR, and BBC. A computer scientist by training, Dr. Ghosh previously worked at Facebook, where he led strategic efforts to address privacy and security issues. Prior, he was a technology and economic policy advisor at the White House during the Obama administration. Named to the Forbes 30 Under 30, he received a PhD in electrical engineering and computer science from Cornell University and an MBA from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and conducted postdoctoral research at the University of California, Berkeley. Dr. Ghosh is joining us from Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Honor for that very, very nice introduction. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. We are so honored to have you here. Today's panel discussion is about technology influence on politics. We will explore technology influence, foreign influence into US election, social media influence, policy making, campaigning, voters influence, special interest groups, and more. Technology and politics have always been connected, dating as far back as the Industrial Revolution, which led to some of the most seminal issues in American history, such as labor protections. But in recent years, they have become more or less inseparable. Perhaps the most obvious way that technology impacts politics is as a tool for political actors such as politicians, governments, and other organizations to better identify, engage with, and rally members of the public to their cause, as well as broadcast political messaging. We see this in action every time we watch a campaign commercial on TV, see a political ad on Facebook. Two of the most powerful methods for using technology as a tool include data collection and the use of digital media. For example, Barack Obama famously rose to the president of the United States in large part thanks to a revolutionary and unprecedented effort at the collecting granular data about the demographics and voting patterns of key voters all over the United States. Data collection has always been a key aspect of political and information campaigns, but President Obama's capitulation brought the potential for the state of data collection to the forefront of national attention. The same advancements in technology that allow us to work and play in ways like never before also allow nefarious actors to cause disruption or harm like never before. While some hackers spend countless hours trying to access personal or financial information, many are dedicated to disrupt the political world. These efforts often go beyond simple hacking for the sake of hacking. For example, the hacktivist organization Anonymous is dedicated to exposing sensitive political and governmental information to the benefit of the public. In releasing more than 250,000 classified diplomatic cables in 2010, the web-based organization WikiLeaks proved its power to expose. Along similar lines, but with a more mission-focused bent, is the advent of fake news, a term coined during the 2016 US presidential election. Fake news is media written and published usually with the intent to mislead in order to damage an entity or person or to gain financially or politically. Fake news often utilizes sensationalist, dishonest, or outright fabricated headlines to increase readership. The internet has given fake news an unparalleled platform for distribution. A recent case of University of Minnesota student, a Chinese citizen, represent a dramatic escalation of the Chinese government's attempt to shut down free speech abroad and a global expansion of Chinese police campaign to track down Twitter users in China who posted content critical of the Chinese government. The effect of the new national security law that China imposed on Hong Kong is extending far beyond the territory to American college campuses. China's national security law reaches into Harvard, Princeton classrooms. Professors at elite US universities turn to codename warning labels to protect students. So how technology goes on to influence the political ecosphere past its current ramification on the sector rests on the working of political actors themselves and by extension, the general population. It could be for the better or as we have already seen in the recent times, for the worse. If the former is to prevail, then it's up to the governments, business leaders, and individuals to take proactive steps and respectively regulate, exploit, and utilize technology as it evolves in the political ecosphere. So let's move on to today's discussion with our panelists. We will start with the upcoming US election. The first question is for Sonal. Does Kamala Harris have the potential to excite a new group of voters to get involved in the Democratic Party process? What role can technology play in influencing these potential voters, and what role should technology not play?
Mahenoor, thank you so much for the introduction and also for the great background that you just provided. I think it's important, even before getting into specifically Kamala Harris, I think it's important to recognize that, you know, what you laid out again, the various aspects of technology when we think about campaigns. One is the data that's collected and how it's collected. The second is connecting with people, how you use technology to connect with people. A third on how do we get messages to people and what do they believe and what do they not believe, given how it's used. And then there's sort of the broader question on what are people voting on? What kinds of tech issues are they concerned about? And what does policy look like? And how do younger voters and other voters look at that? So I think there's a broad way that people look at connecting to candidates. I think Kamala Harris offers, as a person, she offers many, many reasons for young people to connect to her, just her own personal story, her background and what she has done in her community, but also for her state, and just who she is and sort of what she believes in. So I think there's many reasons to connect with her that is both technology oriented and not technology oriented, but I think recognizing that she as a person represents a very different part of what America stands for, and she carries multiple identities, multiple approaches, but she herself is an American that is doing and thinking about society in a very progressive manner. So I think that one is that. Two, how she connects to people and how the campaign looks at connecting to younger voters, and especially at a time in COVID where before you would actually go in person and have meetings and have conversations and have events, you're having to do a lot more of that online, and sort of technology is at the forefront of this conversation in campaigns today that it wasn't even when I was on the campaign in early March. We were in person meeting with people, going into small groups, having conversations. That has changed how we approach campaigning and what are digital tools that we might use to do that. So I think what they're looking at, and if I was just our own experience, we were looking at how to make sure we were getting digital content to groups so they could have information to talk to their friends, to talk to other organizers, to make sure people know who your candidate is, who is Kamala Harris, why you should support her. The second part is, digital ads. What kinds of ads will go out? How are they targeted? To whom are they targeted? What does that information look like? And that is another way to connect to young people, but to voters in general, not just to young people. I think you're looking at all voters and what the issues are. And the third is, what are the policies that they care about? And I'm sure Dipayan, Jennifer, Alan will sort of talk about some of this, which is really, what are the policies? How is your data going to be used? Apple is just about to ask everyone to approve whether their data is going to be used differently and what they have to give approval for it. So what are people looking for, and where is a younger generation looking for policy to be much more proactive and much more forward-looking, rather than just looking at what you've seen in the recent U.S. at least congressional conversations taking place, where it's like, does my phone work versus how is data going to be used and how is technology going to be used and how it's affecting people. So I think all of that is at the table in this election. I think Kamala Harris, what she brings to the table is an understanding of the multifaceted aspect of technology and data. And I think this is going to be a very interesting election because all of these conversations are taking place simultaneously. In the final bit, which you asked, and I think my colleagues will have a much better conversation and a point on this is looking out for what's fake. And not just fake news, but what's fake. How are people manipulating videos? How are people manipulating information? What are you being told about somebody? And how do you verify whether that's actually true? Not just believing it because it shows up in your feed or because your friends share it with you or somebody shares it with you on WhatsApp or other tools, but how do you know when something is actually accurate? And I worry, and I'll just say I worry that phrasing of fake news because it's being used in a particular political sense by our current president, and it's not the same as the way you were sort of explaining it, which is how is data being manipulated to give you information that might look real. And those are two different things. I think we should separate that, you know, how fake news, that term is being used, but also how is it that we are, what kinds of content are we getting? And how do we ensure that the content we're getting is truthful? And that's an important question. I think that as consumers of information, we have an important role to play in asking those questions also. So I will leave it at that, and I know Jennifer will have a better comment.
Yeah, thank you, Sonal. So I would like to hear from you, Jennifer, and after that, Dr. Ghosh, your take into it, please.
Thank you so much. And Sonal, just building on what you were saying, COVID has really changed everything, but especially politically. I was talking to two political organizers I know just over Twitter, because that's how we talk in DMs, right? That's how we're connecting with people. And they were mentioning upcoming by-elections and how they had been paused because of COVID. And those are special elections. That's what we call them in Canada. But that campaigning is done differently. And in many ways, this is a great time for tech. Like, look what we're doing right now, right? It's not even possible without Zoom and the mainstreaming of Zoom. And I think back to a few years ago, I was moderating a panel on women in tech on International Women's Day. And I asked the audience to get a sense of who was in the room. I said, can you raise your hand if you work in tech? And as the hands were starting to go up, one woman said, don't we all work in tech now? And I think she's absolutely right. I think we're all in tech now. Sure, some of us have worked at tech companies, or some of us have done, research on these trends. But if you're working teams or WEX and you're working in tech. So tech is becoming more and more a bigger part of our political culture. Where I see the disconnect is those who understand it and embrace it, and in some cases exploit it, and those who still don't buy in. So as someone who's worked at Twitter, as someone who's been a community organizer, I've been a candidate, I've been in so many meetings where people say, well, social media, so what? And it's like, well, people are saying social media, so what? We have bad actors influencing foreign elections, like using those tools. So to me, I just see a disconnect between how, as you mentioned off the top, hackers versus campaigners versus public servants versus activists versus citizens are understanding and utilizing these tools, which are more and more accessible to all of us.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Dr. Ghosh.
Thank you for this, and I would absolutely echo both Jennifer and Sonal. First, about the candidates, Kamala and Joe Biden. I think both of them strike me as being very real people, and of course they're career politicians. They've worked their way up, and they've built a tremendous political following, each of them in their own right, and I think they've done it in the right way, and they've done it for the right reasons with the right intentions, and that's the key here, and I think it just distinguishes them from others that are running in this election. But just going back to my own experience for a moment, I remember when I was a lowly intern Joe Biden spoke with all of us as vice president, and really connected with us so incredibly well, and went off the cuff for an hour and a half, and it was such an engaging experience. And at the end of it, he took questions, and he one person asked him, more than anything, what I want from you, Vice President Biden, is for you to take a picture with every one of us in this room, an individual photo. And he spent the next, I don't know, half hour just taking a photograph with every single one of us. And he's just an incredible person. And I think that is going to shine through as we approach the election. And I would say the same of his pick for vice president. I didn't approach her, but I saw her with her partner on the street the other day in Washington. Of course, all masked up, and she's just very engaging from what I could observe from afar. So I'm very excited to see this pick, this combination, and I think it can lead to much better things in diminishing things like misinformation. Sonal mentioned fake news, which is a term that I don't like either. But we're seeing reports today of 3.8 billion. I forget exactly the measure. Maybe it was engagements with medical misinformation concerning the coronavirus. Some of it, of course, being linked with our current president. And that's dangerous. That's leading to deaths. That's leading to a huge tax on our system. In other ways, it's leading to our economy lagging. These are things that need to be corrected. And lastly, I think this combination is fantastic because the Democratic Party needs to, unlike the Republican Party, at this stage, the way that our American experiment in our national economy and our political system has evolved over 200 years is such that we have this two-party system, and the Democratic Party is the strategy has to be to be a connective tissue across society to bring many people together. And I think both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden do that and will do that even more in the coming months very effectively.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Let's move on to the next question. Roger?
All right, I'm going to ask the next question to Alan. Alan, what role do different multimedia channels play in influencing politics? How do we safeguard elections from foreign influence in the modern era of cybersecurity attacks and modern propaganda? What kind of effective measures can social media platforms and search engine companies apply to stop this manipulation?
Well, I'd say that these multimedia channels, and more specifically the social media platforms, play the greatest role in my opinion. And let's start with Twitter. They have 330 million users. And this is where the political wars play out. People with a passion for politics here, they debate what is right and what is wrong. And for opinion leaders who communicate on television, radio, or on the print media, it's their barometer for where society stands on certain issues. And Facebook is also perhaps even more influential in its own way. It has 2.7 billion users. And like Twitter, there are public posts and groups for people to thrash it out. But the more significant political influence of Facebook is in its advertising space. And for just 25 cents a click, you can promote a post. This, you could basically, a URL, an article, a Medium article, or even a meme or any other content, you could post that on Facebook, and it would run through people's Twitter feeds, and if they click on it, you pay Facebook by age and sex, but also interest and users in a specific zip code. And I know that Biden specifically is homing in on my demographic because I'm seeing advertisements every day on my Facebook feed. Reddit, Instagram, YouTube, and the other platforms that we all know. This is also where political content can be posted, discussed, and spread. So all these multimedia channels, I think that they're more influential because they're more sticky than traditional TV and radio and most print media, because they offer the opportunity for engagement and spreading. And through these channels, anyone can become a journalist. Anyone can be a TV anchor, and I think that's great. How do we safeguard elections from foreign influence? Well, that's a tricky one. As I mentioned in my introductory, my sort of introduction to myself, I mentioned about I spoke to the troll farms. This is where propaganda is spread. It spreads through troll farms. A conversation about the safeguards. Let me give a quick crash course in troll farming. We can call it Troll Farming 101. Let's define a troll farm as an organized group of people, each with dozens of social media accounts. In troll farming, the product is political influence, and often the customer is a state actor. But it also could be a business, and it also could just be a simple special interest group. And like most businesses, successful troll farming comes down to know-how, political capital, and finance. So I'm kind of going to break down those a little bit, not in boring detail. But the biggest challenge, I would say, for the troll farmer is to appear authentic. And I think Sonal, I believe you spoke to the authenticity issue. But he or she, the troll farmer, he or she knows that Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms have algorithms in place that will automatically delete the accounts if they appear fake. And social media providers commit huge resources to discern fake from legitimate accounts. In 2019, Facebook claims to shut down 5 billion fake accounts. Let that sink in. 5 billion fake accounts. And so I would say the safeguard, I say the first safeguard are these social media companies who are out there, with their algorithms and with those tripwires and shutting them down. But for the seasoned troll farmer, I mean, he's done quite a bit of trial and error to understand the algorithm. He knows the behaviors that trigger accounts to be part of the business, and he spawns new ones, or she spawns new ones, and the algorithms keeps changing, and the troll farmer adjusts, and it's just a game of cat and mouse. And even if but let me get back to again the authenticity issue. Even if the troll farmer fools Twitter, he will struggle to fool the users in America. And when you begin engaging with humans, it's hard to pretend to be somebody you're not. The human can detect things that even artificial intelligence cannot. A genuine user makes posts more appealing by providing a context that resonates with the audience he's speaking to. And that can be references to real local experience that refers to real local events, real places. And this is where the foreign trolls fail. Foreign trolls don't pass the authenticity check because they don't have the language and the cultural fluency. They can post polarizing memes and peddle fake news, but unless they have the native English speakers, their posts will not have that convincing edge, right? I think the Russians have done, don't want to be presumptuous, but the Russians have done a good job of branding both the left and the right of America's political spectrum as crazed and malicious. They failed at inspiring opinion leaders, largely. They simply don't have enough people with language and cultural fluency to fool us, at least for most of us. And so for the second safeguard is just the authentic SM user. We have to report accounts, as Sonal mentioned. We have to call these out. We have to study. That's a weird post. I mean, look at it. Who are the users? This guy had this woman or this man has no users and is just constantly just making 200 posts on Twitter in 1 week. and they're all the same thing, I mean, what's going on here? Report them, call them out in the string where you're discussing. That's the second safeguard. Now, I think a big problem is that cost for setting up these troll farms is very minimal, especially for a state-sponsored troll farmer, because much of the tools and technology that are needed are readily available on the internet. And I'm not talking about dark web stuff. I'm talking about the surface web where you can legally buy most of what you need with a credit card. And these tools have become cheap commodities serving black hat advertising companies. You know, these guys who send all those spam emails and you know, there's actually people as a job, they have a troll farm, they go on Twitter and they start advertising stuff and marketing things. So anyway, you can, you know, a troll farmer can buy phone, aged email accounts, IPs that can disguise and make the user look like he's in the United States when he's really in Russia, China, or wherever he's really coming from. It can even buy photographs, which can be used to create, you know, to fake profiles. There's a whole market for this, and you can to make your account look more authentic, you can buy 100 followers for under $7. So it's quite easy. So this is kind of interesting and probably something you're not going to find in any other research. We've actually done some feasibility studies on how much it costs to operate a troll farm, and we, according to our calculations, is making an assumption of, say, $5 an hour, which would be a competitive price in a developing country, right? You know, where a lot of this sort of activity comes from. For every $1, you can influence a population of 1,000 people over a month.
Wow, that's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah. Okay. And you need some really good people doing it, but you know, you can make a lot of it. We're not talking about billions of dollars. We're talking about, you know, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars or a million, right? So, or millions, let's say. You may ask, as a safeguard, why don't we just make this practice illegal and assign harsh penalties as a deterrent? Well, because our press freedoms, we can't stop this through a judicial process. Creating a troll farm with thousands of fake Twitter accounts is not against the law. It is simply going against Twitter or Facebook's user rules and policies. Gaming Google search algorithms to artificially make content appear more popular than it is not illegal. It's just against Google's policies. So I'd say the third, so what are other safeguards? You know, there's, again, firstly, I think it's the social media platforms are doing what they can, you know, and I think they're doing a pretty good job. The main one is you, the user. The third safeguard would be, I would say, improving maybe coordination between U.S. security agencies and the technology companies, right, and the platforms. I believe there is some sort of coordination going on, but I can't speak to that with authority. A fourth safeguard would be a set of new laws and regulations that would inject greater transparency into online advertising. So speaking to the last question, what is the effective measures that social media platforms and search engine companies apply to stop this manipulation? I think there's the goals are in alignment. For social media to be a trusted platform for human engagements, they really have to purge these fake accounts. And again, I think they're doing all they can. In June, Twitter shut down 120,000 accounts linked to China that pushed deceptive narratives about the Hong Kong protests and COVID-19. And if you're posting political content in the US, Facebook has an authorization process to run ads about social issues, elections, and politics. Its aim is really to stop election meddling. And I've actually tried to walk through that process, and it seems pretty good. You know, I mean, they make it is somewhat algorithm led, but they do sometimes have to sit and they really, as a human, goes through and make sure is that driver license real, and does that match with your credit card, and that's US and so forth. And I think that's a really good thing. It makes it difficult from someone from another country to start paying for Facebook ads that push a certain political narrative. And regarding search engines, Google's business model is about helping people find the comment being sought. It awards content that is authoritative and popular. And they award it with high rankings. So political actors, foreign political actors, will try and game the algorithm by artificially showing content that is, authoritative. So, for example, a foreign election manipulator, for whatever reason, does not want Kamala Harris, who we were speaking about earlier, doesn't want to win the election. They would find a really nasty, derogatory link that maybe someone else wrote, or maybe they created themselves, and they'd create a lot of backlinks from other websites that they may have their troll farm go and open that URL, that page, and hold it there for 4 minutes, then close it, and then go to other sort of competing articles and open it and close it quickly. There are all sorts of little tricks that they can do to game the algorithm.
And it should be noted that these tactics are also being used within countries by supporters and activists.
That's true. That's true.
We were one of the first to introduce fake book reviews, astroturfing online.
Yeah, so when you really start to understand how this works, it's kind of chilling and concerning when you see actually how easy it is to manipulate, the search engine optimization, and also this, the ability of sort of troll farms just in droves and just huge numbers, just to sort of just take over a Twitter discussion. It is concerning. But you're right, not just foreign actors, just local actors.
It can't just be left to the companies to figure this out. There is, if we just leave it to the companies to say, hey, stop the troll farms from doing this, we're still going to be in this space even a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I mean, I personally think there's probably a bigger conversation here to be had in one, what is the role of policy in sort of addressing how algorithms and data are being used, and what kinds of algorithms and data are being used. Two, we're sort of obsessed with numbers. I mean, investors are doing this. How many followers do you have? How many influencers do you have? How influential are you? So that sort of drives also the algorithms, because we're obsessed with numbers and scale in a certain way. And frankly, we're not focused on, what's the impact and what's the outcomes we need. We're sort of obsessed with how many followers you have. We don't really care whether someone actually did something. It's whether you had 2 million followers. And Dipayan, I know you've done a lot of work on this, so would love to have your input on this. But and then the third is, I think this has got to be a global conversation. It can't just be a border conversation. Data and information is just borderless at this point, and we need to have a much more global conversation.
So no, I completely agree with you that we can't rely just on the companies. I mean, let's talk about another example from yesterday. We heard about the online dissemination of audio recordings from Ukraine that were designed to smear Joe Biden, and they, the tech companies have been using this same line that they always use. This falls into some gray area because we, Facebook, which I used to work for, we, Facebook, Twitter, etc. This doesn't constitute a hack. This doesn't necessarily constitute. We can't really attribute this to a disinformation operator. We don't know whether they're faked. And yet, first of all, we can say that this is disinformation because we know we can, with any of these kinds of attacks, we know something about the provenance, we know something about the timing, we know something about the target audience, we know something about the content, of course. And so you can say oftentimes with something like this that, hey, there's probably a 60, 70, 80% chance that this is a disinformation attack. And if it's something that we're that confident about, and it's originating from this place, and it's about the US presidential election, the most important election in the world, then we as a company should probably do something about it. And if Facebook, you're not going to do something about it, then Sonal is exactly right. We need to rethink policy because, I think we've gone too far down this road. It's a problem of incentives. When disinformation operators try to identify the thin cracks in society, in the American voting population by using data, let's say, for instance, they access the data from the Cambridge Analytica dump, They can start to identify those 5,000 people in El Paso and those 1,000 people in Manhattan and different pockets of the American community that are going to be well positioned to react to essentially disinformation attacks and start to tweet and reshare and that kind of thing. And tech companies, social media companies are designed to drive engagement in that way. It's essentially a problem of incentives. And Zuck gave a speech late last year at Georgetown where he said that I'm for free speech, and yet that position just serves his business interest. This has to do with this gray area for tech companies where they say, oh, we can't make these attributions, we can't do anything about this. Well, they can. It's just that they take this free speech position because first it doesn't raise the ire of the current president. Second, it doesn't unsettle the president's political base, many of whom, through the New York Times reporting, we know uses Facebook. Third, it doesn't take off very engaging content like the Ukraine, these audio recordings from Ukraine, which are driving engagement. And fourth, it doesn't set in stone, Facebook wouldn't be setting in stone voluntarily where it thinks the red lines should be around what's offending and what's not. Thereby prompt a broader discussion in the public and amongst regulators as to whether Facebook got it right.
We also know that public policy works because Facebook, Twitter, and let's not forget that Facebook is Instagram, it's WhatsApp, right? These are very big companies, but they operate differently depending on the country they're in and what the policies are. So Germany, as we know, has a very different history. And Germany, like other European nations, are actually quite advanced and progressive when it comes to some of these tech and social media policies. I also found, as someone who worked at one of these platforms, Twitter, and I totally agree with you, Alan. It's where everyone comes together in terms of journalists, politicians, pundits, etc. Is that the social media platforms, the policy teams are reactive, not proactive, and it's going to take some time to catch up. And there are also the issues of hate and abuse. And we know that those on platforms who are women, queer, racialized, religious minority are most likely to be attacked. So that actually impacts freedom of speech as well. So there's a lot of issues coming together, but that's my hope for the tech companies, is that they start moving to proactive. And from what we've seen to date, it's public policy that pushes them there.
Next question is for Dr. Ghosh. How can technology influence voters' ability to influence lawmakers and hold them accountable to represent voters' interests? What mechanisms can technology use to equalize power from the public with high-budget lobbyists and special interest groups? Are there any risks to make transparent how politicians are being influenced?
No, it's a great question, and I think when we think about technology and lawmakers, going back to this discussion that we just had, I'll bring up another example. We talked. Alan brought up the important point of transparency. It is important for us to have transparency in, for instance, political advertising, where we should, let's say as an American voter or a Canadian voter or an Indian voter, being subject to a political ad from the Trump campaign or the Hillary campaign or the Biden campaign or a local election, we should be able to know who's paid for this advertisement, which campaign is behind it, which PAC is behind it, how much have they paid, how many people have seen this advertisement, what's the target audience, what are the targeting parameters, and what's the history of political advertisements that this particular campaign or candidate is responsible for. We should be able to see that in political ads and maybe even all ads. But let's just talk about political ads, which represents less than 1% of revenue for Facebook right now. Political ads require transparency. We have this in other media contexts, in traditional media, and We don't have it in social media. We've attempted it through the Honest Ads Act in the United States and in other jurisdictions around the world, which is a bipartisan proposal. McCain, who's since been replaced by Lindsey Graham, I believe, and Mark Warner and Amy Klobuchar, as well as other folks who've endorsed this, in addition to these principal co-sponsors. And yet, and this bill would essentially do something akin to what I just described, and yet it doesn't move forward. Why? It's because of industry lobbying and because of certain politicians' responsiveness to that industry lobbying. To really get ahead of this problem, I think we're going to need to see political change, and it's something that we need in the interest of our democracy. But you shouldn't ask me about this question. You should ask the first director of the Office of Social Innovation at the White House, who probably has a lot more to say about this. And I'm talking about Sonal. Sorry.
Okay.
That was a good cap off, Dipayan. I think I want to just build on the points that he just made, which I think are important. I think one, just knowing where the data is coming from and where it's going to matters. And it may not be that individuals need to know it, but certainly if you make that transparent, then others can look at it and say, what is going to happen so people can learn from it. So I think that is one piece. I also want to make sure that, I know sometimes we can get into these conversations, especially when we look at all the negatives that are happening, that technology also has a lot of positives. Like in government, you sort of want to use technology to deliver better services, to make sure we're targeting and getting services to people who need them, which is a lot of the work we do at the Beeck Center on ensuring that we're getting voice in. Congress recently in their modernization work is now using technology to have virtual hearings and allowing people to have voices to come in. We also need to look at the other side of that. The way we've done government, the business of government has been old ways of doing the business of government. We sort of put a register out there. People have to come to Washington. People need to come and give their information in person, or you have to know this notice got put out on public board, which no one ever found. But there's better ways to leverage technology to also get to people and hear where they are and what they need and what the challenges are. We've got to balance both of those, both all of the negatives that we've been talking about, all of those things that, how to use that. And we also have to figure out how to use it to ensure voice is coming into government. At 300 million people in the United States, or 330 million, it's not easy for everyone to get to every community in every district, but technology allows us to bring those voices in the same way that we're doing this conversation. And it's important that we think about that, but at the same time, recognize that we've been sold the idea that it's always good without ever looking at the guardrails and what needs to be put in, and how do we make sure people are protected? How do we make sure institutions are protected? How do we make sure that we're having an honest conversation on what's working and what's not working? And to the point that Dr. Ghosh was making, it's important to recognize that we've gotten caught in believing that the companies are doing all the things that they can, but that government's not needed in this place. At this point, I would say that government has a role to play. Europe has proven this. California is testing this out. We need to make sure we're thinking about where that balance is, and that is the role of government. It's to protect 330 million people. It's not just to protect the number of people using Facebook, it's actually protecting the 330 million or the global population and making sure they're not being targeted inappropriately. And in this election, and I think it's important that we just sort of keep that in mind, what that's for. And then there's a question you had, and I think you mentioned on sort of transparency and lobbying and how does that look. I think it's important to recognize that transparency for what matters. Just having a lot of information. In the Obama administration, we were very transparent. We made sure that the logs of who came into the White House were made available. We made sure that, the president's schedule was publicly available. All of that has gone away in this administration, and nobody said anything. And so has that increased trust? Has it increased the outcome of what is it that people can know who and what's coming in? Or has it just created a gotcha application for the press to say, I can't believe you met with this person, without asking sort of what is it we want to get at? What's the conversation we need to do? And so I worry sometimes that yes, I totally believe, and I was one of the early, supporters of making sure we put the transparency bills in the Obama administration. But what happened to us that we don't even care at this point, that all of those things that we put in for transparency went away?
Well, Sonal, so
And
much has changed.
please, Jennifer.
The administration. I think of what we did with Super PAC app in 2012. That was the election of super PACs and their influence. And now it's like campaign finance reform, super PACs. People are like, we'll get back to that, right? And transparency. It's like the focus right now are these new priorities because so much has changed. So if you think back to like 2012, I'm like, oh, such simpler times, that election. Everyth's upside down right now.
This feels like a good segue to the next question for Jennifer. What kind of technology can we develop to have instant public engagement on political matters?
Yeah, I think it's really important that politicians, public servants, policymakers go where the people are. And you might not even have to develop new technology for that. So I think a good use of new technology is what we're seeing right now with an attempt to develop the COVID-19 apps. And there's like different pickup and success depending which country you're in. I know Canada, there's a lot of goodwill right now from citizens, but there were some mistakes made. Like I'm not able to download it on my old iPhone, for example. But in terms of a citizen and a candidate, or a citizen and the president or prime minister connecting, there's already the technology that allows us to do that. And I think one of the things that attracted me to Twitter, both as someone who worked there, but as someone who's a Twitter power user, is it's actually the platform where a politician, when you're a candidate, right, when you're just a regular person, you create your own account and you hold on, even when you get elected, you're like, no, let me check my Twitter. Your staff's dragging it away. You're like, please, please, because it's where you get to see people calling you out, applauding you. It's just there. It's 24/7. That's why campaign teams hate it. That's why ministries hate it. But it actually is a 24/7 constituency office, and there is a transparency. So much different than sending an email to your elected representative to say, I have a question, or why aren't you doing more on this? It's out in the public, right? So journalists can pick up on it, right? Others can join in. It can inspire a campaign, and you're more likely to get a response from the politician. So I actually think we have a lot of tools available right now. AOC has done a great job at showing what you can do on Instagram, right? And people act like it's revolutionary. The only thing that is different is she's listening to her community, and they're using this tool. So she's meeting them there. She's like, oh, I'm going on a train ride. Ask me anything, right? Ask me anything comes from Reddit, right? It's a place where people have conversations. So I think we actually have to look to our communities to see what technology they're using. And maybe the technology is an old school phone call, still used by political activists and organizers around the world. It's still a form of technology.
Great.
Let's move on. The next question for Sonal. How can political movements like Black Lives Matter influence companies and policy to increase access to education, technology, and economic opportunities? How are protests and demands for equity changed by technology in terms of reach and global involvement? And are these interest groups more effective because of technology?
I think they're sort of teaching us how to use technology effectively to get to people, to be honest. I think what is so fascinating about Black Lives Matter, and I have so much respect for it, is they have been able to take a widespread movement and connect each other through different networks in different ways. So they're not organized by one group. There's lots of different groups. Black Lives Matter is everywhere, anywhere around the country, around the world. It's not a one person led organization. What they're sort of showing, I think, and it's important for us to recognize, is where in a world we've sort of lived in top down. We've defined this person's in charge, this person's second, this person's third, and this person's the director in this state or in that state. What they have done, and I think they're going to teach us a lot, is they've created a movement allowing different people to take leadership in different ways, and without defining a top-down approach, but allowing that to uniformly grow and to change culture and to change the way we think about it. Look, Black Lives Matter is not new. They have been around for over a decade. What's new is we paid attention. You know, when George Floyd was murdered, that's what's new. What they have been doing is building a groundswell and building a ground movement for over a decade. And we should give them credit that they have been working in communities. They have done old school organizing. To Jennifer's point, they've made phone calls, they've done gatherings, they've gotten together, they've done protests, and they're using technology in ways, and they're changing in the way people think. So I think what they're doing is teaching us that young people are looking at all of those tools equally. They're looking at each one of those when they need them. And frankly, I'd say people like me and my age probably are more stuck in our old ways of doing things and how a process linearly works, whereas they're sort of working in a process that is not linear, but is sort of moving at different paces at different times. So I think there's a lot we can frankly learn. I think there's a lot that we need to see and what is happening and to understand. And what they have shown us, I think more than anything, is where are people? Where are people? What are the issues they're concerned about? And how do we pay attention to it rather than waiting for it to become a crisis? They're telling us where the crises are, and we need to pay a bit more attention as policymakers to understanding and recognizing that earlier, and not just waiting when a crisis happens. So I would say I think there's a lot for us to learn from them more than I think they're using technology extraordinarily well. Technology has certainly helped raise the awareness, but it's not just technology. They're using all of the tools out there, and we should give them credit for that.
Excellent. Jennifer?
I'll just add props to Alicia Garza. She's one who created, that expression, the name of the movement, Black Lives Matter, as a hashtag. It was on Facebook. And I think it also highlights the importance of messaging and how hashtags can, go from one platform to another, and how powerful that hashtag is, that some people won't even say it, that people resist and say, no, all lives matter, blue lives matter, this lives matter. So it shows you what's possible from the grassroots. And I think that's the part that I love so much, despite all the problems of social media and how quickly technology is advancing, right? Like, I feel like even in this meeting, I'm already out to date on a few apps, right? It's just moving so fast, that it is really driven by and dependent on people. And that's an incredible thing, that grassroots organizers around the world can take it and tell stories that journalists have ignored for years, right? To take it to call out and expose corruption.
Dr. Ghosh?
Thank you. I think social media and technology, the internet, definitely helps. It facilitates and empowers social movements in a big way, and this is just very, very much in line with both Jennifer's comments just now and Sonal's comments earlier. That we can't forget the tremendous positive force, not just economically but socially, that social media brings to society. And we can just look back 10 years at the Green Revolution in Iran and the Arab Spring, where Twitter and Facebook had such a huge impact in enabling organizers to bring people together online. And this kind of organizing was facilitated over social media, where it was possible to kind of have secondary conversations that pushed our intellectual boundaries, on topics that couldn't necessarily be discussed at scale in public, because we weren't socially positioned as a society to enable those kinds of movements, like Black Lives Matter, for instance, to gain traction through the physical world. And these secondary conversations, which have now become primary, were empowered and kind of pushed by social media. We can't forget that. And I think the resounding point from all of us is that we want to encourage that positivity and contain the bad, contain the misinformation problem and the disinformation operations and the spread of hate speech and the spread of bias, much of which is exactly what we're talking about through activists are talking about through the Black Lives Matter movement, and as others have put, all the kind of related advocacy that has now found voice because of Black Lives Matter.
I'd like to jump in just really quick and just say how the problems that we have, these are really actually blessings. We have great problems compared to what the countries that I spent the last 20 years of my career sort of working with, where they will shut down Facebook like or YouTube like a bar, or Wikipedia, just because it has derogatory information about the leader. You know, that's how a lot of the world operates. The fact that we can have this discussion publicly, criticize the government, the fact that we're having to worry about, the Voice Over America, Russians' answer to Voice Over America is these troll farms, but we can digest it in a way that Russia can't. Voice Over America can be attributed to actually, ending, it caused a lot of, it really challenged the leadership of Russia in its day, and we continue to use Voice of America in China, and then it's quite influential there. But is Russia Today or Al Jazeera or all these other news outlets, are they really influential on America? No, because we're so bombarded with so many contrarian opinions, so much pluralism. It's just in our DNA now that we just know how to challenge stuff. We can take in disparate opinions. I think that's really our strength. I'd much rather be sitting as America having this discussion than sitting in another country and saying, I don't have access to Twitter. I don't have access to Facebook, right? So anyway, I'm just kind of putting that in. We really have great problems here in the United States compared to a lot of the rest of the world.
Okay, this question is going to Jennifer. What are the gaps that technology can address during policymaking? How can technology help from creation to adoption of a new policy, and how can technology bring transparency in decision making?
Yeah, the way I look at technology and public policy is that they are linked. And I think for any policymaker, they have to have the tools available through technology in their toolkit. And that includes Twitter, it includes Facebook, it includes working with civic tech communities that are popping up across North America, around the world. It's the ability to better listen and serve your community. Unfortunately, there are policies within governments that prevent public servants from doing this, right? So I've been told that there are teams, people working in public policy, for a provincial government, and they can't check their own Facebook because they're not allowed to. And it's like, okay, if this is where people are talking about public education, if this is where people are talking about the upcoming election, we need to make sure that the people who are working on our behalf have access to our conversations, and not just when they go outside and pull out their own phone, right? So I think that's the opportunity, which is making sure that those who are working in the policy space, inside and outside of government, have access to these tools, understand the technology, and are part of the conversation. Unfortunately, I see time and time again, it is the activists, it is often the community organizers and the bad actors that we're talking about. They're the ones who are ahead and best, and of course those in Silicon Valley. But it's like, how do we, and that's what Civic Tech as a movement is trying to do, which is how can we take the technology and all the people who really understand it, who are developing it, and who are spreading it, to make sure that it's helping us build a better society. Because otherwise, what's the point? I think if technology isn't helping create a better world, we're doing something wrong.
Can you speak a little bit more about what Civic and Tech is?
Yeah, sure. So Civic Tech, basically, these are, it's a term, but it's also a movement. So you'll find Civic Tech departments at some universities. In Toronto, we have Civic Tech Toronto, and it's a grassroots, very flat group. Anyone is welcomed, where people come together to find out how they can use technology to improve the city that they live in. And in that case, it's here in Toronto. And it's great because you'll have people who work in tech, developers, co-founders, uh, designers, policymakers, but you'll also have just regular people who are like, I like the sound of this, I want to learn more. And they come together, volunteer their time through hack nights. And hack nights sound very technical, but again, if you're doing civic tech right, anyone is welcome. My first hackathon was at MIT. I was very scared and intimidated, and I ended up winning the competition with my group, even though I came in with public policy skills. So likely for everyone on the call, there's probably a civic tech community near you, and check it out. It's people trying to figure out how they can use technology to solve problems in their community. All volunteer, and right now, mostly online.
Sonal, Dipayan, would you guys like to add anything here?
I would just say, I think I want to add to Jennifer's great comment. At Georgetown, one of the things that we've been doing at the Beeck Center is running civic tech to help city and state governments deliver on social service delivery. So many of us may have read how many unemployment insurance systems were unable to manage the great inflow into the systems, or accessing paid family leave, or accessing your SNAP benefits. And the opportunity is for technologists, policymakers, and designers to work together to really think about how do we deliver in people-centered systems. Many of these systems were frankly designed for administrators, not for people. And what we're seeing is a breakdown of how hard it is for you to access your benefits because the system doesn't know where you are and how you access it. It's just so the administrator knows how to administer it. So I think there's an opportunity for people here in civic tech. It's small things that you can do in your own communities, but it's also thinking about how do we redesign systems that exist that are much more people-centric and much less just about the system itself. How do I make sure if Apple can easily tell me what I should be looking at buying if I'm buying this, then why can't we help someone saying, hey, if you're accessing food stamps, you might also want to access your other benefits over here. Why can't we make a system that does that rather than making it so burdensome on each person to get their unemployment insurance and then get their SNAP benefits and then get their childcare benefits? Like, it seems ridiculous that that's the world we live in, but that's what we do live in. But that's where civic tech can come in, and it's really thinking about how to leverage smart use of data, smart use of technologies and digital services, and really deliver for people.
Great. Dr. Ghosh, it sounds like we should be able to do this. Why can't we do it?
Well, you could just call me Dipayan, but I think,
Okay,
I think there's very little I could add to the brilliant comments on civic tech from both Jennifer and Sonal. But I think there's more that we can do to incentivize civic tech. That's seems a problem to me. That there's tremendously huge commercial opportunity in creating social media. A company like Facebook or a company like Google generates tremendously high profit margins and is supported by this extremely powerful financial infrastructure backed by investors in Wall Street and so on and so forth. And civic tech is a place where they can absolutely be doing more. And I think it's a matter of incentive. I think we have to not saying that civic tech can't and shouldn't originate from other sources too. It absolutely should. But I also think that companies like Facebook and Google can be doing more, and currently aren't. But I think with a bit of a push through policy, as Jennifer put it earlier, we can start to improve the situation.
Let's move on to the next question, and it's quite an interesting subject. This is for Alan. How do special interest groups derive their power and influence? What determines the extent to which they are able to affect policy outcomes? What happens when groups with different objectives compete for influence? How can technology bring transparency to special interest groups' engagement in politics?
A little bit about the lobbying efforts on the Hill. It'd be interesting to hear his comments after I chat. But I think that the process is changing. I've got a lot of experience working in think tanks, but I think that the role of the traditional think tanks, their sort of playbook of bringing together brilliant minds in some hotel and backslapping company by backslapping receptions, then putting together policy recommendation papers, very technical policy recommendation papers that somehow get, brought in, pushed, to different decision makers in Washington. I think that's an antiquated model. I don't think that's really exciting. I don't think that really gets people excited. I don't think people really read those papers anymore or tolerant. I'm not saying we have the attention span of a gnat, but our attention spans are a lot shorter now. And we want to be able to just digest things really quickly. And we're so used to social media. We like stuff that's exciting and captivating and sticky. I think, I think that a special interest group who goes on to change, change.org, and then starts a petition, and then puts it out to their social network, and those other people, part of their social, so they spread it and becomes viral. Pretty soon you've got 1 million people signing up to these petitions. And look what happened with Black Lives Matter. They really played that well. That was exciting. Everyone really wants to be, I think it's in our DNA, we want to be part of something, bigger than we are as individuals. I think that's what makes us human, right? We like to come together over some cause and go up against something and win. And that's not what traditional lobbying is about. That's not how policy has been made. I'm also, and I hope this is true, I think these lobby groups are losing ground. I think they're afraid. I don't think they like the social media trend very much. I don't think they like it that, you can get, millions of people united together and can start going against a lot, say a nefarious special interest group, so to speak, right? So I think social media plays just an incredible role in just changing, how policy happens. And I think we're just getting started. We're just getting warmed up. And I think, new platforms are going to emerge. I think we've spoken a lot already about, how it, influences, policy. How does technology bring transparency? We've also, talked about that as well. But I'd like to add that I think it allows everyone to be a watchdog, right? I mean, and the internet, whether it's, we've sort of maybe backslid on some of the disclosure requirements, and maybe the government has been a little less transparent than it was, but even still, a lot of stuff is posted. If you ever go to Open Secrets, you can see, Fara, Foreign Agent Registration Act. You can see even the contracts that people have with foreign governments and what they're paid to do, and the emails that they send out to Congress, of what sort of they're pushing. They really have to report on it, and that's great. And it's all out there. It's all on the internet. And campaign financing, that's fantastic that we have to report that, and we have to do more. I mean, that's really important. And as watchdogs, we have just 320 million people can go onto social media, and if they see something that's just not right, they can make a big deal about it and promote it and make it a big issue. And that puts more pressure on our political decision makers to represent the constituencies that they should, the voters that they should be working for in the first place, and not beholden to special interest groups that really lobby on the Hill with a lot of with peddling a lot of cash behind them with campaign contributions. So anyway, that's kind of the trend that I'm seeing, and I think it's a good one.
Okay, so now Dr. Ghosh and then Jennifer, I'll let you speak to it to wrap it up. Go ahead, please. So now.
I don't have much to answer. I mean, to add to Alan's. I thought that was those are great points, and I agree. I think there's a lot in what's happened with transparency, and then there's a lot that we just need to make sure we're constantly looking at the norms and how we do that. So not much more to add. I will just say this has been a fantastic discussion, and really have appreciated being on this call with Alan, Dipayan, and Jennifer, and thanks to you, Roger, and Mahenoor for managing us.
Excellent, thank you, Dr. Ghosh.
I'll give that a retweet if I can. Just thank you everyone for the opportunity here. It's important to have this conversation as as peers, but also a reminder of the greater need for media and digital literacy. And I hope that's something we can prioritize in public education moving forward post-COVID, because there are other top concerns right now.
Thank you, Jennifer. Dr. Ghosh?
Yeah, I would of course echo and thank Alan, Jennifer, and Sonal, and both of you, Roger and Mahenoor, for leading us on this last question. Responding to Alan, you know, I think you make a great point, Alan, that social media could very well be changing our circumstances around activism, around advocacy, around political movements. I hope you're right that we can see things like change.org and TikTok and Facebook be a start to breaking the current system, which, as you put eloquently, is very much kind of a I wouldn't say it's currently an old boys club, but certainly used to be, and maybe evolved from that premise. And of course that excludes a lot of people. And still, I would say, even now, advocacy is the dominant force in the world of advocacy is money. We've seen this over the past month, past 6 months. Facebook started up American Edge, which is, the Washington Post describes it as a pro-tech advocacy group to battle Washington, and that it's using dark money or something like this. And it came at a time when Facebook was facing a lot of antitrust scrutiny, and I think that line of advocacy has certainly worked in some ways with the administration, as we've seen Zuck in direct conversation with Trump, and it's hard to say exactly how this all kind of has worked out, but I think you're right, Alan, that things are changing for the better, and I hope that it reforms this system of advocacy that we have in Washington in the longer run.
We are ready to wrap up now. On behalf of Harvard in Tech Seattle, Roger and I thank you for your time today. Our panelists, Sonal, Alan, Jennifer, Dr. Ghosh, thank you. It is a great pleasure to have you as our panelists. It was an informative session and we have learned a lot. To the participants, thank you for joining us today. It is remarkable how significantly all of our lives have changed over the past months. We hope you and your loved ones are staying safe and healthy during COVID-19. We are grateful for the connection and strength of the Harvard alumni community. Thanks to your generosity and support. Hope this webinar will bring in some thought-provoking discussion. If you're interested in learning more, please join us at Harvard in Tech Seattle. Thank you and goodbye for now.